dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China.
More than 4,100 died from COVID. You see the
over new virus variants.
Our fears that the Dow will drop and drop quickly, and we're
which is what you might be looking at right now.
The circuit breaker
There's very little separation.
There was looting underway nearby.
of the president.
Everybody.
The growing political polarization in America is hard to ignore.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and yet strategic choices that all of us can make in order to become the very best version of ourselves. My name is Dr. Michael Brown. I am the host of 3 Words, and today is a first. We are actually going to be engaging in a 3-part conversation entitled Country in Crisis. Country in Crisis, a 3-part conversation with my dear friend, Steve Rieske. I have known Steve for 28 years. We've lived in the same town for 2 full decades, 20 years. Steve Rieske is one of the most respected men that I know. He's a thought leader. He's a historian. He is quite honestly brilliant and very, very kind and compassionate as well. And so, Steve, I wanted to invite you into this 3-part series. They are going to be each 3 words, but 3-word questions under the umbrella of this conversation. Country in crisis. So the question for today in this 3-part series is what?
Is crisis inevitable?
Is crisis inevitable? I would say that we are in agreement, Steve, that we are a country in crisis. And so before we even go to that question and explore the question of is crisis inevitable, let me ask you first, how did we get here in this situation that we're in today?
I mean, without absorbing all the time we have to trace through the history, every culture, everyone that has existed on Earth has had to exist on this weird continuum. Where, like, on one hand, we might believe something like if we all had the exact same set of rules, then nobody would be out of step with one another and we would all be in perfect alignment. But that leaves no freedom, and people don't like living that way. Authoritarian situations usually blow up badly. And then on the other end, we'll have like ultimate libertarianist, everyone does what's right in their own eyes kind of living. And then it creates an incredible amount of friction. And then we're stuck. Where do we move like a fader, like on a soundboard or something like, or a dimmer light switch? Where do we put the fader in the middle to try to say we want to give people room to do what they want, but also have enough common cultural expectations that we're not like think about like driving on the road. You get to pick your speed to a certain extent, but you go too far out that we're going to put red lights on you. And
right.
I used to get a lot of tickets, but the fact is we do that with culture. And here and in the US, as part of the whole cultural experiment was a belief in something that was called classical liberalism. Now make sure we distinguish that from modern progressive liberalism, which is the thing. But classical liberalism said, hey, we can make room for lots of different isms, lots of different worldviews, lots of different ways of life. We can make room for them and basically make it work. And it generally has its ability to work, but the more worldviews we pack in, and as we've become increasingly pluralistic as a society, and as more people from around the earth, as our world has become smaller and people have been able to come from places that might not have been able to arrive here hundreds of years ago, more isms have packed in. Well, then there's only 2 more things then. Then the last century was a war of isms. Communism, Nazism, all these isms, even Christianity, and all these major world forces all came to the fore and said, we're the right ism. Everyone live by our set of rules and it'll work. And of course, World War II is really maybe the easiest example to say those isms can become painful and hurtful.
Yes.
And then it was our generation, really the superior generation, Gen X, the right one, the right generation. But that we kind of came to the fore and the multicultural movement, the postmodernism, all those things associated with us. And we said, you know what? We're tired of isms. We're tired of everyone saying this is the right one and you're all wrong And live and let live, we said. And we created a world where we said, just do your thing. Everyone's equally right. Well, that might have some problems in it, but where we've come to crisis is on that scale, the amount of peoples whose isms are now shoving to the front, where nationalism and anti-racism and progressivism and conservatism, they're all vying for the stage right now.
Okay.
And we're a big country with a lot of places where you can be in your echo chamber and you can be with the people who agree with you lockstep, so much so that you can feel like, yeah, my ism does work. And it's absurd that anybody should ever disagree with me. Because I don't have to, in the world of the social media echo chamber, I don't even have to deal with them until I go to work. Or I don't have to deal with them until we have a presidential election. And it turns out all the isms are not even just coming to the stage. They're coming to the stage with a prepackaged belief that, of course I'm right. My echo chamber already established that. You must be a moron for being the other one. And now we're in crisis.
So it sounds like this has been a crisis that has been looming and growing for many, many years, but it feels different now. Like we're older, right? And so we've seen a lot of this and we've felt some of that conflict and some of that crisis and some of the things. I mean, everything you just described, I resonate with and I'm like, yeah, I see that. I see this, but doesn't now feel different? Or what do you think about that?
You said looming and growing. What if you think of it like waves coming in and out, right? The Civil War and the civil rights movements might have felt a lot like this as well, right? If you would have been in the middle of them.
Well, I'm not that old, so I wasn't there for those. Yeah.
We're close, but we grew up like in the sort of the backwash of that civil rights world where it was still around us when we were children. And then the 80s kind of it was gone.
Yeah.
But no, I think because we're stuck in the middle of that fader, so to speak, it will pop up at times, and how we deal with it hopefully won't come to arms like it did in the 1860s. But it's tough to deal with. Yeah.
So are you concerned?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I really think that we have underestimated. If you happen to have, did you by any chance watch the social media, the social dilemma?
We have, yes.
Yes.
As a family, we gathered around and watched that. Yes.
I am concerned because, and I think that that video showed such a great picture of what the problem is, that we've unleashed on the world with our smartphones a force that is far beyond any of our reckoning and what it is and what it's able to do to shape minds. And with a force that strong, usually you have societal structures designed to help it stay in its place. This one came so fast and from such an unknown place. It's everywhere. It's all over. It's determining whole worldviews, whole ways people think. And it has no checks on it. And I don't want the government to be the checks, but we don't have any checks on it. And in doing so, I'm very concerned that the echo chamber thing is only in the infancy of its problem. People.
So you just made a comment that you don't want the government to be the ones who are checking on that, but you're not sure who, and what, and so forth. And what's interesting about you, and we've not talked a lot about politics because obviously we just experienced the presidential election, but you didn't vote for either of the primary candidates.
No.
And we were talking off camera. And the reason was, and if I can quote you, and I would love for you to expand upon this idea, is you didn't think either of them would actually help.
No, I think they're both the fruit of two large movements at war. And it was really a victor go the spoils thing if either of them got elected. And no, I think we chose the far more polite of the two.
Okay.
I don't think that's really going to be very much in doubt. But no, I struggled. I struggled greatly with my vote. I thought a lot about it because the implications are massive in every direction. But I just couldn't, not for me. But I also don't begrudge anyone their vote. I find that strange.
Okay, talk to me about that. Because obviously what we're finding in the culture today, since we're talking about is crisis inevitable, is there is this sense, and I'm feeling it, And obviously, you know me well enough. I am always one to tout this notion of finding common ground and listening carefully and learning deliberately and looking closely and trying to lean in to understand the other person. But there's been this sense, and I think you've talked about it, you alluded to it, that for those who voted for either candidate, there's this notion there's surely 70 or 80 million people who have lost their minds. On the other side, right? And I'm thinking that can't be true. There's very thoughtful, kind, amazing human beings who voted across the spectrum, including somewhere in the middle, maybe where you voted. But help me unpack that. Help me think about that a little bit.
Well, one of the lies I celebrated Gen X a moment ago, but really one of the lies of that whole Gen X movement is because isms have consequences, we should just have none. That's impossible. We always have isms. Maybe the ism isn't an official world religion or official world movement, but we always do. Secularism is a way of thinking of the world. And we instinctively think, and all of us do it. You do it. But if everyone would just agree with me, this thing could work so great. I promise in your arguments with Teresa, you've had the thought, why didn't she just agree with me? This thing will be over. You know? Right. And in doing so, we look at somebody who's doing the exact opposite thing and going, you're ruining this thing.
You're ruining this thing. Because that actually captures, I think, the essence. It's not that you think differently, but that you're actually ruining the world. Literally. Yes. And probably, if we're honest, from a self-interested perspective, you're ruining the life I'm trying to build for myself. Yeah. So I think, one of the things that Teresa and I and our kids talk a lot about, and for right or wrong, is that whenever we cast a vote, and I'm just curious what you think about this, whenever we cast a vote, in whatever situation, we want to cast a vote not only with an eye on what I want and what is best for me, but what is best for the larger whole. It just feels more, I don't know, selfless, sacrificial, but it also I just don't want everything to be about me and my family and my bank account and my neighborhood and my home and my whatever, Sure, I want it to be.
But you're now telling the people who read Ayn Rand and who say, but the best thing that could happen for us is if we all just took care of ourselves, we'd all be taken care of. And so just as you're doing that, you already trampled somebody's ism. It's harder than we think to do this. This is worth.
But so how did I trample it though? So for instance, if I have that perspective, and let's just go to the question, because the question is, what you just said, there's always going to be isms. They're not going to disappear. Even when we don't have a label for a particular thing and call it an ism, it's there, titled or not. Is conflict inevitable? Is there ever going to be a time when we don't experience conflict?
Yes. Well, every belief system. I'm a Christian, so I believe if Christianity could flourish, but and I mean this in every single way though, that everyone believes that if their way of thinking were to flourish. So we need to talk about the way of thinking. There's three questions that we have to answer to have a real robust ism. All right. So the first question is going to be, how do I experience a healthy or well or a good life? Right. So is it money? Is it health? Is it happiness? Is it relationship? All the things that you pack into that question. And we won't put a lot of work in that unless you want to. But then the next question would then be, how do we create a society that gives that to everybody? So if we call a society just, we will mean something like the society has done its job to make sure everyone has equal access or realistic or robust access to the good life. And then,
so what is the good life? How do we make sure everyone can experience the good life?
How do we do this together, right?
Okay.
We might say arrange a society. We could say the words.
How do we do it together as a community? Yeah.
And then here's the last one. And it's one of the most unexamined, but one of the most powerful of the three is, how do we become that kind of people? So most people, you'll hear them say, the problem we have with whatever side doesn't agree with me is ignorance. Well, that reflects a cultural belief that education is the way to make us become that sort. But I think the more educated we become, does that really work? Some believe in technology, some believe in science, some believe in religion, some believe what's the thing that will improve us, that will cause us to become the kind of people actually able to do it. And so this podcast, by the way, is an attempt at that. It is a way of saying, let's talk reasonably about this. Let's learn how I can do my specific life. You've done a lot of work on choices, and your belief in choices is an examination of the question, how do I become the kind who can? Okay, so those three all packed together. And if I have a person who, especially if they feel threatened, believes that creating personal safety is the good life.
Okay.
And I have another person who says, my personal safety is only your choice to make your personal safety it involves going away from mine. So we'll use sort of like stereotypes for just a little bit. And I apologize if they're too stereotypy, but so you got a person somewhere in the Midwest whose sense of safety, their sense of cultural safety is that the things have always been the same and they're changing fast.
Yes. I hear this all the time.
I might look at the people who are changing things fast going, you're ruining it. And then you might look at the people who are progressive, who are looking and saying that thing that it wasn't that great. It wasn't the good. It's not giving the good life. And we need to change to this new thing. And if you don't, then you'll continue to oppress. We'll use that language that is often used. So now I've got a person who says, stay the same. Well, that's threatening. And that sense of, if safety is involved in my well-being matrix, we are guaranteed crisis now, aren't we? Right?
Very, very interesting. And you don't think, regardless of who is elected, whether it's presidential or congressional or even local, like that isn't, do you think that is going to diminish or at least decrease conflict?
No. President Biden will decrease the conflict for the people who agree with him. And they will feel, whoa, this thing just calmed down for me. But for the people who love President Trump, this thing is on fire. You know, and I've got my opinion on how they see these things, but man, it's tough. In the past, we didn't rely on winning the person who has the most, the president, over all 330 million of us for our most important structures. We used to have intermediary structures that weren't governance. You could belong to your Elks Club. You could belong to your church. You could belong to your, these familial societies. We had more ways of creating societies, little societies around yourself that had those, right? Well, for a whole host of reasons, we've tended to get away from them. Even like the person who doesn't live with anybody, who lives alone, if that's a number that's rising quickly. And we've tended to believe as a society that my personal freedom and my personal identity is my best path to well-being.
Okay.
And we've sacrificed a lot of relational unity. The society's tough because if you want to belong to one, it's going to make claims on you. Like, I want to belong to my family. And because of that, I have had somebody make a claim that I'm not allowed to have sex with any of the other women out there who might be pretty, any of them. And I've had to make the decision, do I like that arrangement? Do I like that her love for me and this relationship is worth sacrificing all that? So in my case, I would say yes, the familial structure, the relational structure was so rewarding. The reward of being able to sleep with anyone I want is so small and tawdry, it's not worth it. But another person might say, my personal freedom, that's the one. And if we do that and we sacrifice more and more of those structures that had claim on us, we should suspect crisis. Yeah.
So you have answered the question, and obviously given us a tremendous amount of background, even to this situation we find ourselves in today, which is we are a country in crisis. You've described it as waves. You think that the day will come when it will be a little less intense, at least for a season. And then there might come another time on the other side of our lives where it will become intense of this nature again. But you've answered the question for us. And for those who are listening and who are viewing even us on our YouTube channel, this is the first of 3 conversations of a country in crisis. So the first question is crisis inevitable? Steve Rieske, my guest here today on 3 Words Podcast, would say yes, it is inevitable and it will always be, to some degree, crisis. The second question that we are about to step into as the second conversation in this 3-part series is this. So please be sure to join us. Is truth knowable? For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.